Because I live in a rural area, people aren't able to travel. It's through PBS that we can learn about places that seem almost incomprehensible. I think PBS is the right place for the series Native America. It represents the way that Native Americans live within their landscapes. PBS has brought to me the rest of the world, and I think that's important.
You're watching New England Public Media on WGBY Springfield.
I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave?
An icon of civil rights history tells her own story in words and song.
Fannie Lou Hamer's America Tuesday, or stream at nepm.org.
Coming up, we're connecting you with the creativity and culture in your community, including a nationally renowned quilt maker.
If I look at it and if it doesn't make my heart sing, I'll go upstairs and I cut it up and start all over again.
Artist Andrae Green explores time, mythology, and history through his work.
The sunset, how the bodies were flying in the air and kind of seemed like they were almost flying.
And did you get a chance to see the sunrise? No worries if you didn't, we've got you covered.
His cameras are set, and his drone is ready.
I mean, this kind of light lasts, if you're lucky, 15 minutes.
Join us for those stories and more as we explore the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. Up next on Connecting Point.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us for Connecting Point, your source for creativity, culture, and community. I'm Saidalis Bauer. Ed Johnetta Miller of Hartford, Connecticut is recognized as one of the most creative and colorful improvisational quilt makers in the United States. Her quilts can be found in both corporate and private collections, as well as many important museums, including the National Gallery of the Smithsonian in Washington. She told producer Dave Frazier recently that quilting studiously day after day gives her a renewed anticipation of what beauty will evolve from it. And he brings us her story.
Quilting has become an absolute passion for me, and I absolutely love it. All right.
From her third-floor studio in her historic home in Hartford's Blue Hills neighborhood, Ed Johnetta Miller makes her way to her sewing machine. Stacked floor-to-ceiling around her are shelves of fabric, kimonos, scarves, and linens. Collections from around the world and around the corner.
People just drop off things. They know you got fabrics, you don't want to use them, drop them off on Ed Jonetta's porch.
Miller's career started as a professional weaver, but for the past 30-plus years, quilting has become her passion. Today, she is considered to be one of the most creative and colorful improvisational quilt makers in the United States.
Weaving was structural. If I wound threads, thousands of threads, and I sat there and I threaded my loom, and then in the middle of the loom there was this little bump there, knowing that it's an error. I have to take all of that out, start again. And in quilting, there are no bumps. If I look at it, and if it doesn't make my heart sing, I'll go upstairs and I cut it up and start all over again.
As a child growing up in Rhode Island, her parents encouraged her to enter a more practical profession, saying art was financially risky. But Miller fell in love with fiber art. Her Aunt Dora, a nurse who quilted and sewed in the evenings, took her to museums, craft fairs, and the nearby Rhode Island School of Design.
She taught me how to do so many wonderful things when I was very, very young. And she had followed my career until she passed away several years ago, and was so proud that I took that little nourishing piece of my life and just had it explode.
As an African-American woman, Miller has experienced many injustices throughout her life. During the pandemic, she began to make a list of all the things that have happened to her and created a quilt called I Have Known Injustice All My Life.
So I got it out. I got it out through my writing. I got it out then through doing my quilt.
Her piece for the recent Textile Center in Minneapolis weaves Black Lives Matter newspaper headlines and other motifs into bold red, white, and black geometric patterns. The colors, Miller says, is the blood we've shared and the blackness of us.
I was glued to watching TV, the news. All I would watch is the news. It became more and more and more angry. So that's why I said, I've got to do something. I've got to do something. And doing something through telling my story of injustices through my quilts. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. It's so, so important, and we can never forget that. Okay, so now what they're going to do, I told them.
In her trademark hand-painted silk headscarves and long dreadlocks, Miller spends much of her time introducing young people to quilting. On this day, she visited the Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School in Hartford to help students with a quilt they will make for their school.
I want to impress upon young people, know your heritage. And that's why I teach at many, many different schools to talk about me as an artist, about my trials and tribulation as becoming an artist, how you can do whatever you want to do. Got to put forth the effort, do a good job at it, and be kind.
Miller's work can be found in museums and private collections around the world, as well as in the permanent collection of the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. She says as long as she is able, she plans to continue to enjoy the freedom, movement, and power given to creating the sculpture of the cloth.
I love the feel, I love the smell, I love the colors. I mean, quilting just takes over my life.
And to learn how the quilter got her unique name, visit nepm.org/connecting point for a digital exclusive piece. Locally based visual artist Andrae Green has had his work shown internationally, and his paintings are included in many private collections around the world. Originally from Jamaica, Green was awarded a full scholarship grant sponsored by the Jamaican government to further his art studies at the New York Academy of Art. Since then, he has continued creating vibrant pieces that reference history and explore time, mythology, and memory. I spoke with Green to learn more about his creative process and how he incorporates his own personal memories and heritage into his artwork.
As early as I could remember, drawing has always been something that I was doing. Where it turned into a passion is when I went to college and I did my first painting in college at the Ed College of the Visual and Performing Arts, which is the only art school in the Caribbean. So everyone goes there. It's kind of like a mecca.
Now, you describe your Jamaican identity as a hybridization of European and West African cultures. How does your heritage influence your artwork, and how do we see this hybrid identity play out in your pieces?
First and foremost, I always tell people like to be Jamaican is not a race. You know, I mean, we're majority Black, but at the same time, these other races are part and parcel of what it means. The motto of Jamaica is out of many, one people. So that, in a sense, is where I pull from my whole how I treat people, you know, just growing up in Kingston, which is very diverse. Then living here in Western Mass, moving to Western Mass with my wife, it kind of, I started to reflect because I wasn't around the culture anymore. And, you know, you start to get homesick and you start to long, and so your thoughts long for home. And it starts to bleed in the work, you know, a lot. And even the stuff behind me, it's about one memory. Me and my dad with my family would go to Kingston Harbor and we'd watch the kids jump off the pier, you know, and it's just remembering that one thing, you know, the sunset, how the sun was, how the bodies were flying in the air and kind of seemed like they were almost flying. It's something that I cherish and I miss.
I noticed that, you know, there's a lot of vibrancy, which reflects the Caribbean culture, but there's a lot of...
and the African culture too. Yeah.
And there's a lot of movement as well. Is there a particular technique that is yours that when someone sees it, they know this is an Andrae Green painting?
I hope so, because I'm in the middle of it. It's kind of hard for me to say, but feel like most of my work deals with memory and time. So a lot, you'll see figures like shifting or being blurred into, or you'll see like a glitch effect. It's a metaphor I use for like memory or something that looks real but isn't, which is like a hallmark for maybe it's not being remembered right, or maybe I'm not understanding it right, you know. So little cues like that, I think, carry on with the work. And also to people have told me like the color sensibility, the vibrance is something that they see from body of work to work.
One thing that stood out to me was that in an interview with the art salon, you mentioned that you don't necessarily see the images in your head, but it's more of a feeling that comes to you. What is your creative process like? How are you able to kind of trust your own intuition and follow it to create one of your artwork?
So for me, it's looking at a lot of artwork, familiarizing myself. I'm always like looking at new art, going to museums, also to draw as much as I can, and then just filling that reservoir. So over time, and then with practice, of course, you have to be in here every day, or as much as you can, for it to feel like, for you to stop like thinking about it and just doing it, and then it becomes an extension. So I think after all of that is being done, then you have a kind of gut sense.
I want to touch on some of the themes that your paintings are about. So you like to show time, mythology, memory, history. Why are those the themes that really resonate with you? And what do you see as the purpose of your art?
And for me, like part of the duty of an artist, if you can say the artist has a duty, is to kind of mark where we are visually as a people, as a race, as a culture. And that's why I feel like it's important. I pick stuff that's important to me, things that I want to understand. I want to understand, why do we believe the things we do? Why do we see the way we see? And of course, I do it through my own subjective lens of, I am a Black male, grew up in a certain time, in a certain place, so I see the world a certain way. So when the phenomenological experiences of this time happens to us, I interpret it a certain way, and it kind of gives the world and I hope posterity a snapshot of where we were. I'm doing, especially these works, you see people outside jumping, twisting, all of that stuff. For me, it's a direct, I'm trying to find, and I never actually said this out to anyone before, but I'm actually trying to give an antidote to what I felt was the lockdown, what people felt. So you're inside all the time. You can't go anywhere. You feel depressed. And they said suicide rates went up, since COVID, since the 2 years. So for me, I want to give people images that release them, that help them know, whether you're Black or white. I'm using the Black male body because, I am. But to help feel release, to help know or remind them that, you are free if you can be in a state, a good mental state, and then so that's what I'm thinking about. That's why I was thinking about the memory of my dad, because that's one of the things that hit me, those kids jumping, and it's just that exhilaration and freedom.
And if you've enjoyed the stories that you've seen tonight, be sure to go online right now to nepm.org/connecting point as we celebrate Black History Month throughout February with a look at the people, stories, and issues that shape the Black experience in Western New England. If you're up early enough to catch the sunrise and the conditions are just right, you may be treated to a showcase of amazing colors in the sky. Local photographer Jamie Malcom-Brown captures scenes like this across New England, earning himself a reputation as one of the best landscape photographers in the region. Connecting Point's Ross Lipman met Malcom-Brown one early morning where both the sunrise and Malcom-Brown's photos didn't disappoint.
In the early morning hours when most of us are still asleep, Jamie Malcom-Brown is awake.
Getting pretty close.
And waiting.
Nice.
For signs in the sky.
Oh yeah, we're getting some real nice color through the trees too.
Malcom-Brown is a landscape and aerial photographer. Here at Cranberry Pond in Montague, his cameras are set and his drone is ready.
I mean, this kind of light lasts, if you're lucky, 15 minutes.
Soon, these faint hints of pinks, reds, and purples will burst with color. And that's when Malcom-Brown takes flight.
Oh yeah, this is a nice guy. We lucked out.
Capturing a sunrise like this, with so much color and brilliance, is what Malcom-Brown describes as an inexact science.
As much time as I spend looking at the weather maps, I get dud after dud, because all it takes is one low cloud on the horizon to kill everything.
Though this is certainly not one of those days. It's the kind where a picture is worth at least 1,000 words.
I mean, I always loved like the idea of photography. Like growing up, my family had like the old big giant VHS camera that you had on your shoulder, and I was always using that at family parties and stuff.
His childhood passion has grown into Malcom-Brown being one of the most well-known photographers in New England, based here in Western Massachusetts, living in Shutesbury. On social media, his work is shared by thousands of followers. The tagline for his posts, a reflection of his philosophy: get out and explore however you can.
I mean, primarily it's the love of being outside. Like, I love to be out exploring new places. I like that drama of things that people don't normally see because they're asleep.
From sunrises and sunsets to capturing the Milky Way in the night sky, Malcom-Brown uses his passion for photography to fuel those days he gets little sleep.
On Mondays, I'm working full-time, homeschooling, and trying to manage my social media presence, which is how like photographers these days get their work out. And it's some days I just can't do it, and it's difficult, but it's the next morning that excites me. The next morning that I can get out for a couple hours and hopefully capture something beautiful.
He's also exploring new ways to capture that beauty. At Gunbrook Falls, just down the road in Sunderland, Malcom-Brown is testing out his new slider. It's a device that he'll program to move his camera little by little, capturing one frame at a time. It's hundreds in total that, when put together, gives you a unique perspective.
Landscape photography is really just the act of being out in the landscape and capturing an image, but I use new tools for that. So like the drone gives you a new perspective that you can't get otherwise. And then the slider that I'm using, it can show movement and time in a way that the human eye can't see. One morning, it was like super foggy. The sun came up through the fog, and one tree in somebody's yard just looked amazing. Like the sun was glowing behind it. I had on my long lens, just jumped out of the car, took some snaps, and it's just, it doesn't look like you're in Massachusetts. Like that moment was just extraordinary.
Every week, Connecting Point explores the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. But it doesn't stop there. You can find us online anytime for exclusive features and content. In this week's digital exclusive, we offer you a curated gallery of some of photographer Jamie Malcom-Brown's best work for your enjoyment. You can find that digital exclusive online right now at nepm.org/connectingpoint. Lenox resident Marilyn Peterson Haus spent her childhood on her family farm in Minnesota and shared a close bond with her twin brother. It's a bond that would be tested as he struggled with a mental illness that was eventually diagnosed as bipolar disorder. Her memoir, entitled Half of a Whole, chronicles the story of her twins' mental illness and the consequences it brings to the family dynamic. Haus joined me to share her experience and how she found the courage to confront her painful past.
I started writing the book about the time I retired from my career. And it happened that my brother died at the same time, and my mother died half a year later, or half a year before him. So the two characters who would never have approved of me writing this book no longer were alive. So that gave me the freedom to write. And I had this heartfelt story that I wanted to get down on paper.
And throughout the book, you touch on three themes, one being the unique connection between twins, the consequences of mental illness, and then your quest for independence. How did it feel to revisit and relive some of these memories and moments that happened throughout your life?
Well, that was very interesting because I felt as though I was transported right back into those situations. I re-felt the emotions. In fact, I think some of them were stronger as I tried to examine what was going on in my mind and at the time, and I relived them. So it was, in a way, helped me to write the story because I could write it from my heart.
I know that a lot of this book is centered around the mental illness that Marvin had. Today, especially living in this pandemic era, mental illness doesn't have the same stigma that it once did. And Marvin wasn't diagnosed with severe bipolar disorder until he was 45 years old. So in what ways did you witness your family cope or not cope with his behavior as a child and eventually his diagnosis as an adult?
When we were young, no one thought about mental illness. When we were in high school, I'm sure my brother was suffering from depression, but the stigma was so great, our ignorance was great, and so we translated it to being that he was lazy. My father thought he was, just a lazy and even called him a good for nothing, which broke my heart. My mother took upon herself to protect him, to try to make him into the son my father wanted. But none of us expected anything. I saw some signs, but it was easy to ignore them. And then when he had a big psychotic breakdown at age 45, that was when I knew he had a mental illness, and my family, my current family, knew about it. But my mother never accepted it, and my brother himself never accepted it.
Another painful moment that for me in the book was hearing about all of the efforts that your mother took to kind of hold back your successes from your twin Marvin. And one of the stories that really touched me in a painful way was hearing how she kept you in a walker as a baby because you began to walk before Marvin did. How did those moments affect you, your individualism, and in turn, the relationship that you had with your mother?
Well, it was extremely painful. And I didn't realize really what was going on. When I found out about that incident when she prevented me from walking, I was stunned. I knew I was having trouble in my relationship with her because she would diminish me. She denigrated my career, the way I raised the way we raised our children, even the food I cooked. And she was so critical of me, and I couldn't understand it. I worked so hard to please her. I loved my mother, and I had always sided with her in our patriarchal family. And then when I went into therapy and came out of therapy, and then I began to work on my own, I realized I had this rage at her. And when that rage erupted, I finally, 10 years after I completed therapy, I was like 60 years old, I confronted her. And she was adamant in her position. And I told her, that she had not treated me fairly. She eventually backed down just for a few moments, but I, at that point, accepted the fact that she was acting out of her own situation. She was desperately trying to protect my twin. And she thought I made my twin look bad. So, and in the process of protecting him, she sort of pushed me aside.
Marvin passed away from cancer at the age of 67. What were some of your fondest memories with him growing up and even through adulthood? And what would you want people to take away from his story and really understand about him?
Well, I think my fondest memories are of all the fun we had on the farm, just the two of us. We explored the woods, we found the kittens and played with them. We fed the pigs. We had an idyllic childhood on the surface, and we had all this free time. I'm sort of stunned at how little supervision we had and thought so many things could go wrong. As for what I want people to take from the book, I think I would hope that they have a greater understanding of the impact of mental illness on a family. It's devastating. And he tried to hide his mental illness, and we weren't able to talk about it. And each of us were operating out of our own expectations, our own needs, our own pain, our own, what we wanted out of life. So I would hope the reader also has more compassion for each of us who are involved in a family with mental illness, that we're all imperfect, each of us, and that we're all profoundly human.
For more from Marilyn Peterson Haus, head over to our webpage for a digital extra as the author takes us back to a moment in 1959 with an excerpt from her memoir, Half of a Whole, when her relationship with her twin brother began deteriorating as she was on a quest for independence.
Augsburg would be a good school for Marvin, Mom said the evening after that. I choked on a mouthful of milk. If he goes to the same school as Marilyn, they'll have the same vacations, she said. They can drive the 50 Ford and ride together when they come home on weekends. I wanted to say, Mom, it's not going to work the way you think.
That digital extra is available online right now at our webpage. And finally, this evening, we'd like to take a moment to say goodbye to colleague Mark Langevin, who is retiring at the end of this week after more than 28 years with WGBY and New England Public Media. Mark has been a valued and respected colleague and friend to all of us here at NEPM, and we wish him the very best in this next chapter of his life. He will be missed. And that does it for this edition of Connecting Point. Remember, you can always find all of the stories that you saw in this episode, as well as exclusive features, digital-only content, and so much more online anytime at nepm.org/connectingpoint. And please be sure to join us again every week right here for more stories of the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. I'm Saidalis Bauer. Thanks for watching and have a good night.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers.
I question America. Is this America? The land of the free and the home of the brave.
An icon of civil rights history tells her own story in words and song.
And we've been down so long, we ain't got no other way to go but up.
Fannie Lou Hamer's America Tuesday or stream at nepm.org.
We'll take world events, 30, 61 seasons of local high school wit.
East Granby.
Anne Frank.
Anne Frank, yes.
As schools match wits, pits area high schools against each other in a fun, competitive quiz show.
McDuffie.
A terabyte?
Yes. Watch your favorite weekly quiz show Saturday night at 7 or stream it at nepm.org.
This week, it's East Granby versus McDuffie School on As Schools Match Wits.
I am Mohammed and this is my wife Aliyah. We have 4 kids under the age of 6.
They're American, but they haven't seen their life represented on TV. On Let's Go Luna, one of the characters had a scarf, and that shows them that they're included, that they're connected, and that helps my kids so much.
PBS Kids is a partner to parents. They are focused on how to raise kids the right way, to look at the world as one.
I would love to become a cyborg, to run faster, to jump higher, to do all kinds of things that we can't even imagine today.
literally within minutes of having it all connected, it starts becoming part of me.
I believe the individual will be able to design their own physicality, will be able to sculpt their own identity.
Augmented on Nova.
Watch Augmented Wednesday at 9 or stream at anypm.org.
Sanditon returns at last, so let's review the season past. Charlotte Haywood came to town. The Parker brothers showed her round.
Here we are.
Lady Denham, very rich. Sydney swims without a stitch. Georgiana's secret man. Ed and Clara's fiendish plan. So much drama, love, desire, scheming, greed, and fire. Fire! How to catch up, dear friends, don't despair. Passport's the answer, the whole season's there. Sanditon, catch up now on season 1 with Passport on the PBS app.
You're watching New England Public Media, WGBY Springfield.
All who set foot in Sanditon fall in love on the spot. Was that your experience, Miss Hayward?
You remain stubbornly unwed, I see.
I believe independence is something to be encouraged.
Oh, don't be absurd.
I will not let you destroy my reputation.
I am besieged by fortune hunters. I have a plan for us both to find husbands here in Sanditon. Love is not as simple as you seem to think. Why should it not be?
The new season of Sanditon premieres March 20th on